I live Howard Anderson, and everybody calls me Sonny because I live is a very difficult but old Viking name. And I was born at west of Robsart on the northeast quarter of Section 7, Range 25, Township 5, Range 25, west of 3rd Meridian. And Dad went to get the doctor in Dora, Dr. Johnson, but the car broke down, so I was born before he got there. No credit to myself, but that's how it was. My father was born in North Dakota, and his father came there in 1879, homesteaded, and then in 1910 they re-homesteaded up here at Robsart. And my mother's family came from Norway, and she was born in Norway at the Lillehammer in the Gudbrandsdalen Valley. And the places weren't too far apart in the later years, and they married like after they got up there. They didn't know each other before that. And I was born, as I said, on the farm, and I grew up there. I went to school first in a little school called Luce School, right across the road from where I lived. And it's in Constable now. It was a teach reach for quite a while, but it's still there. They moved it, and they took my high school in Robsart High School and graduated from there. And from when I graduated from school, I was accepted for the Royal Military College. But my mother raised such a fuss, it was just after the war, that if you went into the Royal Military College, you'd go to war and all be killed and whatever. And Dad really, needed some help on the farm, and I was the only boy, so I stayed home. But then I went into the bank here in Maple Creek and worked there a little over a year, and I would have made my career in banking, I think, but my father got cancer, so I came back down to the farm and helped him run it, and slowly bought land and acquired farmland. But I have to be honest with you, it was not my ambition to ever be a farmer. I didn't mind it, but it wasn't. And I envy people who say all my life I wanted to do so. I really never knew what I wanted to do all my life. I didn't say I wanted to be a doctor, lawyer, whatever. And so after I came back to farmed for a number of years, and I got in the cattle business and pig business, both because of people owing me debts, and they couldn't pay me, so they gave me cattle, gave me pigs. So I started in that. And I was always quite active in organizations, so I became a director in the Saskatchewan Stock Growers for a number of years, and I became a Federation of Agriculture, and married Joy in 1962. She was a neighbor girl. Her maiden name was Breakfast, and they lived 6 miles north of where we lived. And courted her for 5 years till I finally convinced her to marry me. Built a house on the farm. It's still there. Tom Ermenko lives in it. And we had a daughter born in 1970 called Jennifer, and she had the transposition of the great vessels and was operated in 72 in Toronto, and then died from a heart attack in 1979. And our son, Jordan, was born in 1975. He's now married, and he's a vice president for the Federated Crop Refinery in Regina. And so we farmed, and I enjoyed farming in fashion. I did a lot of things. I was in partnership here in Maple Creek with Don Perrin for 20 years. And we built the motel, we built quite a few buildings and houses, bought the Stewart Ranch and put the electric drive pivot on it. And then about that time, when they were convinced me I was kind of mouthy, I guess I should run for politics. So I ran in 1975, got elected to the Legislature Assembly, and served a term there. And when I was there, I got to know and argue and visit with Eugene Whelan, who was the Federal Minister of Agriculture. When I lost the election, he asked me if I'd come to work for him to do a study on beef industry, some stuff. So I went to Ottawa on a 6-month contract and remained there 27 years. And I worked for Mr. Whelan, and I worked for the Prime Minister's office for a number of years doing speeches and research, and for ag economics. So I worked for 6 different prime ministers, starting with Trudeau and ending with Martin. And after that, Joy was a teacher, had it before we went down to Ottawa, but there she got her degrees in a number of specialized certificates and taught till we came here. When she came here, they needed a teacher out at the Healing Lodge right away, and you had to have an Alberta teaching certificate, which she had. She had her Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Alberta. So she went out and she still teaches there. And that's, I guess, about, like I say, I didn't plan any of it, it just happened.
Can you tell us some of the memories you have of Robsart and what it was like growing up there? Yeah,
I know, like I was born right in the heart of the 30s, and I guess we were poor as church mouse, but the whole country was, so I never, being a child, it was actually a wonderful life. We always had lots to eat, you know, and it must have been an awful worry for the parents. But we had wonderful neighbors, and at that time, the community always together for everything. They had everything from 1st of July picnics to ball games so you really mixed and met with the community a lot. And I never was a spectacular in sports, hockey or ball and that, but I sure enjoyed, you know, going and watching and going on that. And as I say, it was certainly the dirty 30s and no crops and anything, but it never, I can't say that it scarred me that I thought we were suffering badly. Just as a child we didn't, or I didn't anyway. We always had some cousins hand down clothes, and we always had lots to eat, so things were pretty good. And then later years, when I started farming, I think I hit the lucky end of it when I came back home, because the crops started, the grain started coming. We got good crops, the prices were good, and as I got into the cattle business with the farming, and it was a good time to start farming in many ways, because you didn't need a lot of money to do it like nowadays, and you could buy a half section, which I did, and then another, and keep adding to it, which is difficult now to do. And well, I enjoyed the people and that, but I never did like, I liked the cattle, I didn't like farming. I always didn't like sitting on a tractor going around and around and around and around and around. And so when they, I guess it wasn't hard to convince when they asked me to run in politics to move, and I'd been inactive in many things, and so going out wasn't, you know, a real challenge. And when we got married, Joy had to finish her teaching certificate, so we spent that winter in Saskatoon. She went to college education and got her certificate, and I attended the School of Agriculture. Then through the years later on, I did a lot of work and study in economics, and worked with a lot of professors of economics, and did a lot of papers and writing with them. So I got a good background in it. Wasn't too, I guess you could say, formal in that sense. But in later years, I attended the Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, at the School of Business, and I got what's called the Executive Master's of Business Administration degree. So I have that, and I guess that was it. But a lot of my work was in when I ran the Farm Credit Corporation. I was appointed in to go, and right when the interest rates went up and there was a foreclosure bad, it was terrible times and difficult times, and the corporation itself was in financial difficulty. They'd been very lenient in their lending, which was, you know, at the times was good. So I was told to straighten up and get the books in order, and we did. We ended up foreclosing on a lot of land, a lot of farmers. In fact, we ended up with over 1.5 million acres of farmland, 55 townships in Saskatchewan alone that were foreclosed on. And it's sad, because when you foreclose on a business in town, you don't usually take the house and everything you own, but on the farm you do. At the time I was pointed to that too, the act was changed. We used to borrow our money from the federal government, the Treasury Board, and from then on we were told to go onto the capital markets, not in Canada but outside of Canada, to sell bonds to raise the money we needed for lending. So I had to hire people. We set up a money market business, the bond market, and did bond issues. And that was quite a unique experience for myself because we went all over the world, from Tokyo to Switzerland to wherever, and did bond issues. And nowadays it doesn't sound like big money, but we do a bond issue, it'd be 100 million at a time. And the first time I signed one of those to borrow, that was quite a undertaking, but we did a lot of it and you got used to it. And in that case too, I did a lot of studying and learning on the capital markets and bond markets. And because of my position, we were the largest agricultural lender in Canada and the 11th largest financial institution. I used to be asked to attend the World Bank meetings and the International Monetary Fund meetings, and I did presentations at them on our agriculture and how we financed or tried to finance it and difficulties, and exchange views with them.
Can you tell us some of the big changes in agriculture that you've noticed since you were in it to now?
Yeah, it's become much more, that's kind of a dangerous word to use, but more business-like. We used to conduct it more quite often as a way of life. You had a little leniency in how you operated, and nowadays it's big business and very small margins, and it takes a lot of money to operate it. And because of that, the family farm, in a sense, we used to consider a family farm as virtually disappeared. And it's been a long struggle way back in the 70s, when I was there in the late 70s, and that 85 to 90% of the farms in Canada, but especially in Saskatchewan, survived with off-farm income. Either one of the partners worked off-farm or both of them. And that is how they, stayed in business. So agriculture has always been, if you go back all right to history, right to biblical times, has been a very unique, that the primary producer usually doesn't make very much money. You're very tightly squeezed, there's very little profit. And the other thing that we've done in North America here, especially, more so than maybe other countries, is we came up with the strange idea that we had to, we'd get a farm, we'd build it up, and then we'd sell it to our sons or daughters. And so what we did is we bought our own farms and paid for interest on them and payments on the dang things forever and ever and ever. You never got cut up, we still are doing it. And it would make much more sense to me that if you had a farm and you wanted your to pass it down or to go, you really don't need the income to live off it. Don't buy your own farm, go buy the neighbor's farm, if you will. It's just senseless the way that we in agriculture conduct our business. So that the great big bulk of the profit in agriculture pours off out of the land in interest payments and income tax. In fact, you'd find it unbelievable in this area here, if you want, the amount of millions of dollars that go out in payment of interest every year, which isn't used to be spent in the country to build, to acquire, to do anything. It's gone, goes to Toronto or wherever, and the rest goes in taxes. And so we're left with very, very little. It's a very small profit left. And that's changing a little. And what's happened now with the farms are becoming less and less owned by the owner, but they're being bought and accelerated now, and they either manage it for the people who buy it, and that money is usually coming in from the big mutual funds and big pension funds. Because, for instance, last year the farm values in Saskatchewan, the value of farmland went up 28%. And so if I was an investor and I want to invest, of course, the place to buy is one of these, and they are here, there's one Regina, Lethbridge. You buy into that fund and you made 28% profit, not 1.5%. So they're in buying land is crazy, and the land goes up and it works. And it's not unusual, it's just so accelerated that I think you're going to see such a change in agriculture, and what you're seeing now, that you won't believe it. It will not be, it'll be managed by professional managers, but they won't own the land, which is unusual. I mean, most of the big companies, the people who run it don't own the company. They don't own many of them shares in it, so it's not unusual. And I remember way back in the early 70s even, when places in this area, especially ranches, would go under, and the bank would make a deal with them. They'd take all the profit, pay them so much to run it and go it, because if you're lending money on a ranch, especially, it's very interesting. What do you foreclose on? In Saskatchewan, you can't foreclose on the home quarter. You can't foreclose on the lease land. So what are you going to foreclose on? So they didn't do it, and I know in this area of ranches since the 70s have been ran that way.
Do you think that it'll go back to the old feudal system like they had in England?
Yeah, we're just about there now. See, the only difference is since the turn of the century, like not this one, the one before, 1900s, 85% of the people in any country were engaged in agriculture. And they fed themselves and and the other 15%. But what we've done since starting, well, about the Second World War, we've converted labor into capital, into money, buying tractors, buying combines, and we used fossil fuel. And so that we have very few people operating. The last census I remember was 268,000 farmers or agriculturist farmers in Canada, and they count anybody with 6 cows and stuff as but if you break it down into the statistics, 15% of the farmers in North America, in Canada, US, or the European Union produce 85 to 90% of the food. So you can, in Canada, 60 to 65,000 farmers across Canada produce 90% of the food. So that's what makes it so difficult when you're trying to take the smaller farmer in to do policies on subsidies or to help them when they're in trouble. Because if you take the smaller farmer, you say, well, we got to have $100 an acre or $200 to exist when we're having a tough time. Well, that's well and good, but then you take the farmer who's farming 10 and 20,000 acres, which a lot of them, you're going to give him tax dollars of over $2 million. I don't think the taxpayers will go for that, or the city. So it should be actually split in two, and what we called agriculture should be split off as, well, hobby farms, to be blunt, is what they are. They really, you can't make a living on them, really. And the big farms do fairly well, thank you. But yeah, we're feudal now, really, if you get right down to it. And it's a change. It's a big change. And you don't, I guess, I don't know if it was actually good luck or just because for 20 years that was my job, was doing statistics and trying to draw up programs. You got to look at it from afar and see what was happening. Where when you're sitting close to it, you don't realize it happens, but you just don't see the march of it, and really that it isn't going to reverse itself. And so the whole area, like here, even since 1960 and 70, of this area and the Reno municipality, we've lost what, 90% of the population, and so what's left, we're just going to, still get a little tree, and it'll be farmed. The grain will come off, or the food value will come off, but there'll be no people there. And that's sad, it is, but I don't know how you reverse it. Because it's, what would reverse it if you ran out of fuel or you ran out of dollar, but especially if you ran out of oil and diesel fuel, we'd starve. We couldn't get our crop in the ground, we couldn't use fertilizer, we couldn't get the thing harvested. It would just grind to a halt, and we'd have to go back to 85% of the population on the farm with horses doing it. So it was a change caused by that. And
do you think it will go back to that?
Not unless they run out of fossil fuels, and even if they do, there'll be, I think it's other substitutes they'll use to go, They always tell us we're running out of fuel, but any of the stats that I've seen, we've got quite a supply left on hand, no matter how we waste it, really. But it would sure be a shock in to our whole system if they said there's no fuel this spring. You can imagine all those big tractors with the Bayer seeders behind them, not moving. What would we do?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, yes, it's been a very big change, and in some ways I consider myself fortunate that I was able to be part of overviewing it, in a sense. You know, history's such a change, and to kind of be part. And I did a lot of the work on better or worse, on subsidies and change in farm policy and programs. And I know some are detested, and some, but they had to be changed. They couldn't be left the way they were, or they disappear. And it's been a general push for 20 years in the government to get government out of agriculture, to let it go on its own, and for better or for worse. And it's been a push, and it has succeeded. Like a lot of our programs of support are gone. Our freight subsidy is gone. Like all those are just, and that was a push they wanted to get rid of for years. The push went on, and it has succeeded in the general. The only things left, and I don't give them a long shelf life, is the marketing boards for eggs, milk, and chickens. And it's just because when we go to the World Trade meetings, which I've been at, we can't ask for free trade, but say you can't trade chickens or that into ours is protected. So it's like a lawyer's term, you can't suck and blow at the same time. And so we don't get very good results on our negotiations because we're a split personality on them. But yeah, it changes, and there'll be some big changes when that happens again. But some of the bigger dairies that are adjusting to it already, they're going through. And so it's, but it's been a good life, really. It's, I feel sorry for the changes in the small towns and in the communities, because we don't have them anymore. You know, it's a struggle, and everybody fights to keep things going, but there's just nothing. Nobody's left it. There's nobody left.
Can you tell us some of the things and some of the people that you had for friends when you were growing up? Some of the things you did?
Oh yes, we had a lot of good friends. Sadly, most of them were in the graveyard. I grew up at school. One of my closest friends was Willis Peterson, and he was just a mechanic and a welder from the word go. And our biggest sport in the wintertime was to build snowmobiles and stuff that sometimes we just about killed ourselves with. And we did a lot of, build ice fishing shacks that we moved and burnt because the snow fell, and things like that. And a lot of, a lot of good people, just a lot of interesting people. And we used to enjoy going to the ball games to see them, the different people play ball and haze them, and the big 1st of July things up at the lake. But there was sure a lot of very, well, they still are, community-minded people that did a lot of work. I know when I took my 4-H, like in the beef club and that, there was, oh gosh, now my memory's going, but the leaders of that, Lauren McClune and John McClune and all those, they just spent hours and hours of work. And then I remember, well, Joy was part of that, the Light Horse Club with Wilf Grinnelson, and all that work, because it's just volunteer, and they had the children's stuff going, and and a lot of the people really were talented. And I don't know what it is about the Cypress Hills and the south of the hills there that draws people. If they ever live there for a little while, they'll never leave it. They'll always come back. And when you think of like Mrs. Natterborn, played in the symphony in Berlin and the Carnegie Hall and whatnot, came down and that was it. That was her home. Ben Broderick, he was there and traveled all over. When he's got to be back, you know. And it's I don't know why it is, but I know it's there. It's just myself. The hills call me back. The hills will always be home, you know, in the south and the people. I think it's, well, it's not certainly as much as your memories and the people who are living there now and lived before. That's what draws a person back, I think, because we're one of the most, as far as I can tell in my travels, one of the most. Well, lenient's not the right word. We're very accepting of things and people. Like we don't discriminate. We're not. We're like, for instance, here in town here way back we had Gordy Lyman, and we had those. Any other place he couldn't live the way he did. And we just put up with him, and he did left a good life. And the same down south, we don't get all riled up because a person of a different color or different comes in. We just accept them, and that's it. And I think that's part of it. I guess basically because maybe they all toughed it out together, but they're kind people down the southwest here. They really are. And I don't say they won't get mad at you and take a whack at you, but I mean they are. They're basically very, very, very kind people. They'll try to help others and they'll think of others. And I think that's more so than many other places I've been where it just doesn't happen. They just don't. First, they don't like strangers, and if they don't like them, they don't put up with them, and they tell them so. But yeah, there was a lot of real mentors too that I did have. I remember one fellow who took kind of me under his wing was old Rube Gilchrist, and I used to go up with him, and he taught me a lot just on ranch. I don't know why we hit it off, but we always did. And that was when I was farming. I trucked grain in that, and I used to haul grain and stuff for him, and got to know him. And then we did a presentation on the beef marketing board, him and I, first one years ago. I was only 17 or 18 when we did that one. And I remember we did wrote it up, and I said, when we got to town at the armories, they had the hearings in, and they said, well, you have to make a presentation. Oh, I said, no, Ruby, you're making it. I'm not. No, he said, I can't make that presentation. And right, so the advice, you go up. So I went up and made it, and Jack McDougall was in the audience, and to this day he laughs. He said, I was so nervous, and my knees were so shaky, my pants fluttered while I was making it. And there was a lot of really good people who would help you and mentor you, and if you got in too deep stupidity, they tried a nice way to get you out of it and straighten you around. And but it's sad, I find, to open the council phone book, and I don't know hardly any of the names even that are on the farms anymore. I guess daughters married sons-in-laws, and the son-in-laws are on it, and they use the name. And so you realize that they're kind of anachronistic and outgrown my time, I guess. And I guess that's what's happened, and it's different. It's been, well, I'll be 80 in July, so it's been a long pull in some ways. So it's no wonder half the people I know are dead. That's one thing I always regret. I never have had a hobby. And my only hobby is reading, and I read and read and read and read. In fact, it's been all my life. I was reading before I went to grade 1. I could read books. And I've read ever since, but I don't do woodwork, and it's sad because you don't, like I look at old Ben and East Drain collection, and Joy's dad, before he lost his eyesight, he'd do woodwork, beautiful, stuff like that. But I've never really had a hobby except reading, and that did well with the research, because a lot of the work I did, most people, well, they thought I was nuts because I liked doing it, but they would have hearings across Canada over something, like going across, and they collect all presentations on tape and in writing, and then they'd give me a call, and they'd have a row of them as high as that table sitting there of presentations, and I would have to, my job was to take and read them and go through them and bring them down to a 40-50 page booklet with a page and a half executive thing on the front. And I've always had I'm losing now, but I always had almost a photographic memory. And so I could read them and do that and bring it back down. And that was really one of the rare things I was in Ottawa all those years to do, because they get stumped with this stuff, and they'd go to hire people and, oh, we can't do that, we can't, you know, and I didn't, it takes time, but that was one gift I had that really kept me in Ottawa a lot. And I had a really, really good memory, still have, sort of. And that was the same thing. I would travel a lot with the minister or with the Prime Minister, sit at these meetings, and if they needed information, you gave it to them, hopefully. And I could usually come up with well, like Tony Merchant said, I was the only person he knew whose mind was filled with trivia, and most of it was useless. But it was helpful for, like, with the minister one time. I remember we were in Saskatchewan one time with Mr. Whaling, and they said, they were giving him the gears over Indian land settlements. What's he going to do about it and whatnot? And he was kind of stuttering a little, and I said, if you give me a moment, I said, the minister, you know, recalls too, but said in 1933, the Canadian, they made an agreement with the Canadian government and the provinces. The provinces got to own the land and the minerals, but in exchange for that, they would settle Indian land claims, the land for it. And the only thing that the federal government really does is oversee the negotiations, see that the Indians hopefully don't get too tramped down. And they said, oh, well, yeah, that was the end of the day. I left Will and said, is that true? I said, yeah, that's true. If you're going to negotiate, you should negotiate as a group. And he thought marketing controlled production. My argument with him all was a marketing thing to control sales. Because if you go as an individual, you have got no bargaining power at all, you know. And if you go as a group and bargain all your cattle or your grain in one whop, and that's what we're losing with the wheat board, is the bargaining power. We're going individually. And if you stand alone, you get picked off alone. And it's like with the union, if an individual got picked on, if you unionize, you can stand up for your rights. And I used to have big arguments with marketing boards with at meetings, and one guy out of Guelph, he was just dead against them. He said they're not allowed, they shouldn't be, they're just a dearth on the humanity. And I said, well, it's strange, because as far as I know, you're a tenured professor of economics, yes? Said you can't lose your job unless you abuse little children or do something, you know, stupid. You know, no, I'm tenured. And I said, as far as I know, your group sets the exam for how many can come in and get expense, and so control your own wages. Yeah, that's true. I said, sounds like a lot like a marketing board. They said who can raise, how much they can go through, and what they're going to charge for the services. He got so mad he threw his books and left, and he never attended a meeting with the game. But it's the same thing. I think of the marketing board as much as control budget is just be able to bargain and bulk for your, you know. If you went in and said, I've got 100 or 20,000 yearlings coming off grass, and this is what I want for the 20,000, instead of taking them in bits and drips, you know, you got better bargaining power. One of the weaknesses of the marketing board, and this is just a proven economic fact, is they put them in so they try to keep the small producer, and a small producer will disappear entirely under a marketing board. Will, and you know, he's going to keep the small farm, and said, you lose them, you have to. It's the economics. Like dollars never lie. If you want to see why something happens, follow where the dollars go, and that's why it happened. Anyway, you set the price of milk production there at your sloppy producer, you're talking about here on the real good producer, said are halfway. So I want to go expand and buy more quota, which is very expensive now, and I waltz into the bank and I say, I'd like to buy more quota. Well, what's your cost of production? How would you turn out? Well, it's below the average. It's, you know, and nah, I'm not interested really. If you're below the average, you're not making a profit. But then you waltz in and you're at the top end, and you say, I want to buy more quota. How are you doing? Here's what my cost of production, here's what I make per, no problem. So that when the quota comes up, you can't get it because you can't get the loan, and you can, so you buy it out, and in time you just sell your quota and get out of it. And that's the thing on the marketing board. It doesn't reward the ones that are slack-ass. It wipes them out. And that's the weakness. And I mean, it's a weakness, but it doesn't do what Whalen and thought it would do. I was a farmer rancher for years, and we're very independent souls, but many times we would do better if we would negotiate together as a group than if we, go up individually. Because there's really not a association or that doesn't do that, from teachers to lawyers to economists.
So do you miss the politics end of it?
Yeah, I miss the politics and the people. That's really what I enjoyed about politics and all that is I like people, and I enjoyed being in the interaction with people. And I really miss that, I do. I miss being in the Hill in Ottawa and on the debates, and even if you're not, you have a feeling that you're where things are happening and you're part of being it happen, but you're really a very small part of it. But yeah, I miss that, I really do. Like I worked most of those years right on Parliament Hill and various, like the East Block, Centre Block, and Fed Building and whatnot, and did a lot of different things. I've spent a while setting new senators up in their office and explaining to them what they could and couldn't do. And it got to the last that they wouldn't listen, and I resigned. I said, I'm not going to be with, and I'm glad I did, because I see what they're doing now. They couldn't do, you could through their heads what they're doing with their expense accounts. That's can't done. You're not gods, you're senators, and they are rules you have to follow. And so I did. I enjoyed it for a while, and I just resigned. It was worth the trouble. Because if you don't do it, it's like if you're a deputy minister or a Crown Corporation chairman, you're supposed to, job is to keep your minister from doing things he shouldn't do, like signing for bad tuna or stuff like that. And the fact is, if you tell him not to do it and explain he won't do it, you're supposed to go to the Prime Minister and say, your minister going to do this, which will be an embarrassment and it's wrong. And then he'll step in and straighten the minister out and fire you. Well, you defend your minister and you didn't, did you? You went and squealed on him. If you don't do it, he'll fire you.
So you're damned if you do it.
But it's better to be fired for doing it than not doing it.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a strange life. You're there at pleasure, they call it. I call it like being a mistress, because you can be let go just like that. They no reason, no nothing. You're just down the road. That's it. And usually you're the scapegoat if anything goes wrong, even if it isn't your fault. They won't do the ministry, and they'll do yourself in. Like. So it's a strange life that way. It's 35 years since I was elected. So you meet somebody on the street that's 40 years old, he's 10, he don't know who you are. I don't even bother to tell him I was your MLA once. Just. So time passes you by. It really does.